Hello and welcome to These Days Are Ours and Night After Night's crossover spectacular. I'm Peter.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Chris.
I'm Lisa.
Yes.
And
we have been brought together by the forces of nostalgia to talk about the Happy Days of Garry Marshall, which was a special that aired on ABC, paying tribute to the late great Garry Marshall, creator of Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Mork and Mindy, director of films like Beaches, The Princess Diaries, The Princess Diaries 2, Pretty Woman. The fact that I listed the Princess Diaries movies before the objectively better Pretty Woman probably gives you an idea of how old I am.
My order probably would have been Young Doctors in Love first, and that came out when I was like 3.
Oh, wow.
I think it was 3. I think it was like 3 or 4 when that came out, but I was raised on that thanks to HBO, so.
Yeah, I want to just get a baseline opinion from the panel here. What did you all basically think of the Happy Days of Garry Marshall? What were your overall impressions? Peter, I'll start with you.
I thought it was terrific. I thought it was a very loving tribute to to a very special person who touched the lives of a lot of people and who seemed like a really stand-up guy. It was definitely like, it didn't focus on some of his lesser works. They didn't bring up Lansky's Beauties. They didn't bring up the one with the angel, Out of the Blue, although that may not have been created by Marshall. I think that was 2 people who wrote on one of the shows. I should probably check that, and they also didn't mention his later lesser films like New Year's Eve, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, and honestly, they really shouldn't have, because those films aren't very good, and we want to remember Garry Marshall at his best. So, good call there.
Well, it was
I was waiting for Joni Loves Chachi to come up. I was kind of waiting for that to kind of like come up out of the blue.
Not only did it not come up, neither the names Joni nor Chachi were actually said out loud in the entire 2 hours. And Scott Baio obviously is still around. They could have gone to him for an interview, and they clearly did not.
I wonder if the reason why they didn't go to Scott Baio for an interview was because of the 2018 allegations against him by Nicole Eggert, which were that he sexually abused her on the set of Charles in Charge when she was 14 onwards.
I assumed that had something to do with it. I assumed that the special didn't want to have anything to do with Scott Baio in 2020, as I don't think most of us would want to have much to do with Scott Baio in 2020.
Yeah.
But it was clearly it was a highlight reel of a show where they were just focusing on the happier or more positive aspects of the show, the more positive aspects of Garry Marshall's career. Briefly, on Twitter, of course, we were live tweeting it and wondering if such a thing was going to be mentioned or if it wouldn't be. And they didn't mention Me and the Chimp. They didn't mention Blansky's Beauties. They barely mentioned Exit to Eden. I was waiting to see if they would mention Exit to Eden, then they did.
We got a brief clip of the title card of Exit to Eden.
That was it. But well, okay, those days movies, those Valentine's Day, New Year's Eve, blah, blah, blah. They mentioned that a little, I think, because wasn't Kate Hudson in one of those?
I think.
Yeah.
Oh, she was. Okay. Yeah, because I thought.
Was either. Yeah.
Was she the bitter single woman in Valentine's Day, or was that Julia Roberts?
Weren't they all bitter single women in Valentine's Day? Wasn't that the whole point?
Oh, yeah.
I'll work on the research. Hang on a second.
Well,
she was in one of them.
I remember that one of the plots in Valentine's Day was Taylor Swift and Taylor Lautner being like high school sweethearts.
Yeah.
Maybe they break up. I don't remember.
I was also shocked that Seth Meyers was in one of those movies. Which one was that? Which one had Seth Meyers in it?
I want to say Mother's Day.
Oh my goodness.
Pretty sure it was Mother's Day. Pretty sure.
Wait, but from our Night After Night crew, I don't think we got overall opinions of the happy days of Garry Marshall. Just what were your overall thoughts?
I'll start.
Yeah, go for
I cried like a tot.
it.
I cried like a tot.
Aw.
Mostly because you like seeing that confirmation that someone you admire is a really good person. And you like seeing that, and it was just beautiful. Everything about it was beautiful. And then you see Penny there in footage and go, oh gosh, Penny's gone too. And like, there's a lot of beautiful stuff in the special, and it was a really, really nice tribute to him. And it was a really, really, really nice tribute to all the good things he brought into the world. So I cried frequently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to my end, it was interesting, coming into it a bit later. I wasn't able to join all of you because of the time zone difference, because I'm on the West Coast and y'all East Coasties. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was something that was. I have my note here that it felt like very much like grade A mythologizing, to like make sure thoroughly, completely that you do not ever want to see or know anything else. It puts you in this wonderful, like, sweet, like, family album piece, and in doing so, I like that it means that it lives up to its name. It's the happy days of Garry Marshall. I mean, it's fluff, but it's well-intentioned fluff, and I have some kind of deeper thoughts about what that means, and especially what I got out of it. But a lot of what really spoke to me about it is just seeing how strongly the ideals of this person were lived in his life. And that, I think, is something very powerful. Like, even noticing, like, because seeing all the emotions on Twitter in the live tweets, and then thinking like, okay, I'm going to probably end up being perhaps a little more cynical. And then noticing straight out the gate as they're starting to almost, like, just to introduce the concept, some of these people they're interviewing are already starting to get choked up, and realizing, oh wow, this is somebody that really everyone misses. Like, whenever they think about him, they miss him so much. And it's like, you have to be a really inspiring person to get that amount of love out of people in return, and so it's really good. I mean, there's definitely some issues I have with it from editorial speaking, because I've edited documentaries and things like that. And so I felt like the first act, there was definitely some parts that were kind of jumped around a little bit. So, some of the transitions from subject to subject are not as smooth, because with that amount of interviews, you would have plenty of connective tissue. But if you're having to make hard cuts for deadlines, you just don't have the time to smooth it out. But I loved it.
Kind of piggybacking off of what you said, it's very sincere. It's like, the thing about niceness is that it can be very manipulative. Like, you look at someone like Ellen DeGeneres, who for years had this reputation as one of the nicest people in Hollywood, and then but like, if you've ever worked for her, you've got some kind of you've got a story about how horribly abusive she is to you, and that's being backed up by the fact that she's basically just laying off a bunch of workers with the coronavirus going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, but this did not feel, well, it felt a little bit manipulative, but not overly so. And it's, you get the sense that everybody working on this, they knew Garry Marshall and they cared about Garry Marshall, and that's why they're doing this. And I sincerely hope that, going back, and from this, you really do get the sense that Garry Marshall was someone who practiced what he preached. He believed in sort of kind of looking on the bright side of things, and that is of looking for the silver lining. And he also believed in treating people kindly, and that's very nice. And something that Oscar Hammerstein once said, "I know the world is filled with troubles and many injustices, but reality is as beautiful as it is ugly. I think it is just as important to sing about beautiful mornings as it is to talk about slums. I just couldn't write anything without hope in it." And I think that's also true of, not quite to the extent of, I think that's also true of Garry Marshall to an extent. And something that came up a few times in the special was that he believed in looking for, believed in finding conflict in small things in everyday life. He generally stayed away from the fantastic, except when aliens showed up. And
yeah.
so,
Well, I think the greatest testament to Garry's genuine niceness is that if you look at the people who worked on his TV shows and then the people who worked on his movies, it's the same people over and over and over again behind the scenes. He had the same people working in his crews, and from television show to television show, from one project to the next project, it's the same people working on all of them. And so I think if he were one kind of person, for the press, and then another kind of person behind the scenes, I don't think he would inspire that loyalty. And again, the other name that you see in credits for Garry Marshall's TV shows and movies all the time is Marshall. Other people named Marshall. He had everybody in his family working on these shows. And there's plenty of Marshalls who worked on Happy Days, plenty of Marshalls who worked on Laverne and Shirley.
Yes.
But not just that, other people brought their family members on. Several members of the Happy Days cast have brought their family members on as guest stars. So, I mean, it really was a family atmosphere. So I don't know that there's a hidden dark side to Garry Marshall. And again, maybe that's why Exit to Eden didn't work. I don't know why he thought he was like the right person to do an Anne Rice adaptation, but
and I can say the way they adapted it was very much not like the book, is all I can say. They turned it into a slapstick comedy, and there's Dan Aykroyd and Rosie O'Donnell running around in leather with their guns trying to get. That's not what happened in the book, and it's like.
The one dark movie, supposedly, is a movie that I think several of us have seen many, many, many times, which is Beaches. But it is. I mean, it has a sad story in it, but I don't think of that as a dark movie at all.
Oh no! I mean, it's a powerful movie about. It's a movie about the power of female friendship. It's a movie in which the most important relationship in these two women's lives is with each other. Which is also true of Laverne and Shirley.
Which is why season 8 doesn't work.
Yeah.
That's why season 8 doesn't work, because there is no Shirley, and we have to deal with that. That's what happens. To deal with that.
Yeah, season 8 is...
Oh, that's
season
rough.
8 of Laverne and Shirley is...
It's basically Laverne and Squiggy, which is a weird premise.
Oh, man.
Because not even Lenny is on there.
Michael ran for his life. Man. Michael had literally written into his contract, if Spinal Tap took off, they got funding for Spinal Tap, he was allowed to bail out of the last season of Laverne and Shirley. And what happened is they did, and he did, like, let me think, 1, 2, 3, he did about 5 episodes, and he directed one. And otherwise, nothing. And he was contracted to do 9.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear more voices now saying to me, season 8. And I hear that Jaws theme. And it is on my shoulder, like, oh god, what's it's like, oh boy, I'm still the little child that's just starting on season 2 now.
You see, right now you are in the thick of what I think is like one of the best runs of Laverne and Shirley episodes that exists. So, the thing is,
sorry, go on.
Well, they mentioned it in the special. It's one of the few negative things that they said during the special was that in its second year, Happy Days was kind of slumping, which it did pretty hard. But Laverne and Shirley did the opposite. In their second season, they actually got better. So they became one of the funniest things on TV in the second season. So
if
this might be a controversial thing for me to say because I am on the Happy Days podcast and not the Laverne and Shirley podcast, but I think that Laverne and Shirley is overall a stronger show than Happy Days. I think that it's because it has the benefit of starting off a lot sharper, and for the most, I mean, up until honestly, even with the move to California, I think it stayed overall stronger than Happy Days did. I mean, up until season 8, it's really good stuff, and it generally had the benefit of not having to write in new characters to replace our long-running, older, beloved characters. Like, I don't know if there's really a Roger equivalent on Laverne and Shirley.
Let me think. The Roger equivalent is probably Chuck in season 8. Probably around there. David Chuck is kind of supposed to be the Lenny and Squiggy equivalent because even they're not even using David correctly by then.
So he's also like the Chachi.
Do we have a Chachi? Now I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying to think, and it's kind of like. But then again, this show, I tend to say that this is a very horny sitcom, and it is if you really watch it. Which I'm embarrassed to say, but hey, it's true. And for all that, we don't have any of those hunky sex appeal characters except for Carmine. Carmine is basically out there always shirtless. Look at Carmine by season 8. So I guess he's our hunk du jour, so to speak.
That seems rather sad in some respects, but to piggyback off where this conversation is going, though, back to the special. I think what we're mentioning though is this one of the strengths you see about Marshall and the way he worked with his team was that he was very adaptable. The story, for instance, about the discovery of Robin Williams, or the stories of going to the live studio audience. Those basically discuss that one of Garry's strengths is that he was adaptable. And one of my favorite things that going back through my notes, I can't remember what point they're talking about. I think it was when they're talking about some of his later films. It might have been like when Chris Pine was discussing Princess Diaries, and when you're directing, and I've directed, I make films, I work on films as a director, and it can become a very rigid process when you're working in independent DIY kind of circles. And it seems like Garry took the opportunity to create these environments where you could listen and nurture. And I think that's why you have, say, for instance, the stories like with Julia Roberts, where she's able to be kind of nurtured and pushed, I think in many ways it's not just that the movie Pretty Woman made Julia Roberts a star. It's like he, as a director, and the people that he had kind of fostered to grow into that, become part of that crew, helped her understand what being a movie star was going to be. And so like, that's one of my other big takeaways from this retrospective, is that it shows these really kind of aspirational traits, even as a creator, not as well as a human being, but also like as a producer, as a creator of content, as a writer and a storyteller, that you want to be that person that listens and adapts and figures out, okay, this isn't working. What can I do to adjust this here, and work out the kinks? Like going from, say, season 1 to season 2 of Laverne and Shirley, where you oil the machine a little bit, you make these adjustments, and then you figure out, okay, this is what we want to do. Let's go for that.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty good observation. Garry was about giving people what they wanted, and if something wasn't working, he was always willing to adapt it. One interesting quote from the special that is resonating in my mind now is that I forgot who said it, but that Garry didn't direct movies; he hosted them.
Yeah,
and basically he created an atmosphere in which good performances could happen, and he always felt that actors were giving better performances if they were happy on set. And so he always says that Happy Days was a very happy set as well. They didn't really go into the negative side, which was that Laverne and Shirley was a famously unhappy set. And the one quote that I thought was hinting at it was when Cindy Williams said that she felt she was on the soundstage at Paramount for the rest of her life.
I love that quote so much. I love it so much. It's true. The Happy Days actors, as we all know, used to take glasses and press them to the wall and listen to Laverne and Shirley actors fight. That used to happen. That was reality. And yeah.
One thing they didn't really mention was, I guess they mentioned it a little bit about Garry being a teacher, but his set was always like I always thought of it almost being like a little film school, basically, where Anson and Henry and Don and maybe even Ron were learning how to make shows because Garry was very open with them about showing them basically how the show was made. I thought that was... did they mention that much in the special? I can't remember.
I don't believe they did.
they didn't go hard on that, and they should have actually, because it's really interesting. Because Penny started her directing career on Laverne and Shirley. Michael started his directing career on Laverne and Shirley. Cindy directed one episode. It's incredible. It's one of my favorite episodes. And then she didn't direct anything else, but she also started on Laverne and Shirley. So I think everybody directed on there except for David. I don't think David did an episode.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of directors, the one person, there's various people who I think were snubbed a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about Jerry Paris, but I will also mention another Jerry Belson, whose name flashed very briefly on the screen, I think a couple of times, but he was Gary's writing and producing partner for, I think, about 10 years. And I don't think he was mentioned out loud at all.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't at all, which is surprising.
And I don't think they mentioned Jerry Paris. I don't even think once. I don't think Jerry's name even appeared on the screen.
Nope, not once.
So, Gary, I think, started working with Jerry Paris and Jerry Belson. In the early days, they all worked on the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I think Jerry Paris ended up directing 95% of the episodes of Happy Days, and he's not even mentioned at all. But I guess it kind of dilutes the story. I guess if you have, you say that Gary was working with partners or he was working with other people, you want it to be like this myth of the one guy creating all of this stuff.
Yeah. And kind of going off of what you said about Happy Days being a very happy set, I'm surprised. I'm not surprised, but I wish that they had talked about Roz Kelly, who played Pinky on the season. The season 4 opener of Happy Days, Fonzie Loves Pinky, parts 1, 2, and 3, and she was going to stick around.
Yeah,
there was discord, quote unquote, between her and the rest of the cast and the producers. So she was let go, and her only other Marshallverse appearance would be in an episode of Blansky's Beauties.
Yeah,
and the thing is, a lot of the times when it's said that a woman is difficult, what it actually means is that we treated her badly and she didn't like that, so we got rid of her. And I want to believe the best of Gary Marshall and the makers of Happy Days, but part of me wonders just what exactly happened there, and I wish that they had kind of brought that up.
Well, in defense of the Happy Days crew, I have heard that Roz Kelly was kind of a hellraiser in real life as well. There was an infamous incident when her neighbor's burglar alarm went off, and she responded by shooting into the house.
Oh, wow.
So that was the real life Roz Kelly. So I don't know if she was maybe literally difficult on the set or if she was just figuratively difficult on the set, but clearly something went wrong there because Pinky Tuscadero was meant to be an ongoing character on the show and then never was.
Although obviously shooting into your neighbor's house is bad and you shouldn't do it, but that was in 1998, which was years later, so who knows?
Well, I was gonna say that she was supposed to end up marrying Fonzie eventually, right?
I would guess so, yeah.
They got engaged in her first appearance.
That's right.
So
that's right.
So that was clearly something that they had to drop, and then they, because there was such a response to it, they had to do something, so they created the character of Leather Tuscadero.
Yeah.
And was there a third Tuscadero?
There was not. There were only the two.
Only two. Okay, so they created two Tuscaderos, but they had to do something because the Fonzie Loves Pinky story was so popular, and they weren't going to bring Roz Kelly back. But I remember Roz Kelly being a panelist on Match Game around the time of Happy Days, and a fan comes out of the audience and wants to kiss her, and she says yes. And so he comes out of the audience and kisses her, and then Roz Kelly says, "Oh, you're so much better kisser than Henry." So,
whoa!
So she was trashing Henry on the show right there, but I think
it is good television, though. It's very good television.
Yeah, yes, it is. Speaking of that, I thought that was one of the best aspects of the special was that all these clips from Mork and Mindy and Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days and then all the movies, it makes you just want to watch all this stuff again.
Yes.
And it brought me back to the days of VHS when
Yeah.
Overboard, Pretty Woman, and Beaches were just like on constant rotation. We watched those films, I don't know, a dozen times a piece or maybe more. So there were certain scenes from Pretty Woman I think I had memorized. I'm pretty sure there was passages of Beaches that I had memorized. And it made you want to see all those shows again. However, there is an issue here in that I think CBS Paramount bought all these shows just to bury them in some landfill somewhere.
It certainly feels like it.
We can't recommend anything. We can't give people streaming links. We can't do anything. I can say, go watch the show on Logo in crappy format, not remastered like we got in these clips, with the tag scenes cut off, which I don't forgive them for.
Never
clips-
forget.
Obviously, we would never condone piracy ever.
Oh, no, not
Never.
Ever, no.
But I would have to say that's another point that was brought up. The clips used on this special were in absolutely pristine condition. They just looked absolutely gorgeous. They looked like they'd been filmed yesterday. They look great. Especially the clips from Laverne and Shirley, like the jokes still worked. They looked absolutely crisp and clear and colorful, and they looked great. So I was like, these shows are ready to go. I don't know if they cleaned up these particular moments just for the special. I imagine that they did a little bit, but
I can say from experience, I have almost the entire run of Laverne and Shirley on DVD, except for season 8 and season 7 at the moment. And I can say that remaster is better than the DVD edition that we have. They cut corners a lot starting in season 2 just so they could get DVD sets out. So we got huge song substitution issues.
Happy Days is only officially released up to season 6, I think, on DVD. And I think the rest, you just have to go looking for it. And
God, yeah,
I think
do the VHS. People just keep circulating the tapes. Mystery Science Theater in the late 90s method. My God,
absolutely. So there was one episode, and Peter will remember this, that we reviewed for our show, which was the second anniversary show from season 3, I think it was.
Yeah,
and it was in pretty crappy condition. But that one might have only. Yeah, what would you say about that one?
As I've said before, the first time I ever watched it was for the podcast because it was not with the rest of the show when I watched the whole show for the first time. So I honestly had no idea that it even existed. And I kind of get why, because it's a clip show. It doesn't really further anything at all. It's just a clip show. But at the same time, it is part of the show and you shouldn't, get rid of it.
Well, it looked like it hadn't even been preserved terribly well, but
Which
somebody
makes me wonder if it's not even in continuity. So
we're saying that it's not. We're saying that it's a non-continuity episode. It's non-canon. But all the clips from there looked like they were just beautiful. They were. Was there anybody who you were surprised was not interviewed for this special?
I was actually thinking about that. I was actually thinking about that subject, trying to think of who was missing. I couldn't think of anybody who super. I wish they had made contact with and added in offhandedly. But
I thought of Bette Midler from Beaches. Bette probably could have been there.
Yeah.
But that was the other thing I noticed during the special was that Anne Hathaway looks so much like Julia Roberts, and Barbara Hershey kind of looked like both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe Gary Marshall has a type that he likes to put in his movies. So it's so I didn't know if that was intentional or what. If maybe, although there's a very cute story in the special about how Anne Hathaway was chosen.
Yes, that is so adorable.
I loved everything about that.
Yeah, he let his daughters decide who to cast as Mia in the Princess Diaries, and they chose her because she had the best princess hair.
So cute. So cute.
And this was another special that made me like Anne Hathaway even more. For some reason, for a while there, Anne Hathaway gets a lot of criticism on the internet, and I never understand it. I always like Anne Hathaway. So
yeah, I feel like with Anne Hathaway, there's a mixture of the fact that I think any actor in the last like 20 or 30 years that makes it big doing Disney films and then makes the leap, you know, because that was the thing when she started doing more adult, kind of more mature content, you know, like on, what was it, Havoc and a couple of other films. Yeah. And people were all upset. And it's like, she even said, if Havoc had made me a success first, this wouldn't have been an issue. But since I made a Disney film first, it becomes an issue. And so I do know part of it was things like that, where like, you know, people were down on it for that. And there were times where, you know, with some actors, they just kind of get cast in certain parts that, you know, that for some reason they raise the ire. And I do think that her coming up in the 2000s, I think was difficult. And that's actually what was interesting coming back to seeing these clips, remembering that period that like, because God, when was Prison Stars? That was like 2000, 2001, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Around there.
Yeah. Cause I mean, it was like this strange flashback, you know, seeing some of the background players and just even seeing like the wardrobe in that picture and seeing how, you know, and how young she is. And it was, it's a relatable flashback to at least to those of us who are, you know, of the younger generation.
Regarding Anne Hathaway, I remember there being a lot of criticism for her around the time where, you know, stars like Jennifer Lawrence were getting big off of, oh, they're so quirky and relatable. And it's like, not like that poised, prepared Anne Hathaway. And it's like,
that's the one of the criticisms.
None of them are relatable.
That was one of the things, like, that she was kind of like the teacher's pet, goody two shoes, like, you know, show offy kind of actress who kind of thought she was better than everyone else. I never got that from her. She was always like so willing on shows like Saturday Night Live and The Simpsons to make fun of her image.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know. I always thought that the backlash against Anne Hathaway was misplaced. So I'm glad that she came off really well in this special. Now, I would not call this a documentary. Would you call it a documentary?
No.
They're classing it as a kind of a TV movie for the Emmys. Because this is going to be up for the Emmy, up for Emmy contention.
That'll be interesting. Yeah, I would say front and center, it's a retrospective show. It's a clip show, basically.
Yeah.
Did you learn anything about Garry Marshall that you hardcore did not know?
I did know about the princess hair thing. That was very nice. And the part about Barbara Hershey asking for her face to not be shown at the end of the matches.
I love that story.
To just kind of let Bette Midler's face tell the story. That was, I really liked that, and I hadn't known that before.
That is so great, because that was something I had not noticed about that part of the film before, but now I'll never not be able to see it. So that was a great story. So I can't say that I learned a lot of biographical details, like, and this year he did this, and then he moved from here to there, and, you know, and then this project was followed by this. I didn't get really a great sense of continuity or chronology from it, because as you mentioned earlier, the story is kind of told out of order, and it's more grouped by emotional subjects almost. It's almost grouped emotionally rather than chronologically, because I can already imagine the the biography version of this story, where it was like in 1972, having failed to sell Happy Days to ABC, he turned around and he sold Me and the Chimp to CBS, which is what happened. He couldn't sell Happy Days, so he sold Me and the Chimp right back to back.
Me and the Chimp is such a story, by the way. It's such a story because Ted Bessel hated being on that show so much, and he was so public about it in the press. I know a lot about that part of it because it was in What Were They Thinking, which is a show about television disasters. Laverne and Shirley season 8 makes that list, by the way, in the book.
Oh, wow.
As it should.
Well, Me and the Chimp.
They interviewed David and I think Cindy for that.
Speaking of which, listeners should know that if they go onto the ABC YouTube channel, there's a bunch of bonus clips that didn't make it into Happy Days of Garry Marshall.
Yes.
Including an extra interview with David Lander, who talks about the origin story of Lenny and Squiggy, if people didn't already know how that happened, and how they were Lenny and Anthony, and they played it at a party, and they tell the whole story. And there's a montage about the Happy Days softball team, and they got Vin Scully to introduce that part of the documentary. And so obviously they had to cut a lot to get it down to 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
I love that bit about the softball team. I love that bit about the softball team so much. That's probably my favorite out of all of that, because I already knew a lot about how Lenny and Squiggy were put together because they researched that for the podcast. We talked a little bit about that in the first episode. And I was going to say what I learned. The one thing that I learned, I did not learn that Barbara charged him money for a joke that he used on television.
Right.
I love that
story. That's one of my favorite stories. I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. I did love the idea that, and Garry was very honest about this, that he just took stories from his family's life, and they played a little bit of that, of an interview that he did about his time working with Carl Reiner, and he told Carl Reiner, I don't know what to write. I can't think of anything. And Carl Reiner said, you don't have to think of anything. What happened to you? Name an embarrassing thing that happened to you. And then he's told an embarrassing story. He says, that's an episode. Name something embarrassing that happened to one of your kids. That's another episode. So you don't have to actually write anything for sitcoms. You just borrow from your life and you turn that into episodes. So
yeah, which is
I thought that.
I was just gonna say. I mean, that's obviously has done really well for both sitcoms and comedies and dramedies, for decades. And it was definitely a well-learned lesson, I think, with Garry. He's was able to carry such a humanity through all of the work that he did, succeeding that.
Yeah, it gives everything just that air of authenticity. By the way, that narration that Garry does all through it, I have heard it is from the audio book of his biography. Is that true?
Yes, that was confirmed by a friend of mine. It seems to be from that. I know he wrote several books about. I think he wrote two memoirs, unless I'm completely forgotten. Yeah, Wake Me When It's Funny, and I think. I'll have to look that up. Yeah, I know there's one for sure.
Well, you couldn't really have a Garry Marshall special without Garry's voice all the way through it. And in fact, towards the end of the show, there was what I expected, a montage of people imitating Garry. Because when you talk about Garry, you end up talking like Garry. So there was no way to do it without Garry's voice. So I was glad that they were very fortunate that there happened to be this audio book of him talking about his life, so they could use that as the backbone of this special. So they got very fortunate there. As a documentary maker, you would be very appreciative if you had something like that to work from. I'm doing this biography of a director who was from Bulgaria, and he had a very thick Bulgarian accent. And a documentary was also made about this guy, but unfortunately, he hadn't recorded an audiobook about his life, so they had to hire an impersonator to talk like him for the whole movie. So it works, but it would be better if you actually had, vintage recordings of this guy talking, which is what you had here. I have not read Garry's memoirs, either of them, but shame on me. I guess I should.
I've read them. I've read one of them.
Yeah, it's research for your next your next big project. You have a summer coming up. You have time.
Right. Well, I feel so guilty because Anson Williams wrote a book. Marion Ross wrote a book. I'm pretty sure Henry Winkler has written more than one book. I know.
Well, when we finish season 11, we can have a book club.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
There you go.
Penny Marshall did a book, and I don't know if either of you have seen if any of you have seen the commercial that was done for Penny's book.
Yes, it's Fred Armisen. Yes, I have. I've seen all of them.
And that was one thing that was wonderful about the Penny's archival appearance here, is that Penny was already in her tiny sunglasses phase. So she has her trademark tiny sunglasses. And if people are looking for information about Garry, one of the best sources is, I don't know if you guys consult this in your research at all, too, but there's a YouTube channel called Foundation Interviews.
Yes. Yes, we do that. We use them a lot.
Yeah, I get so much of my research from that. And Garry did hilarious interviews. Gary's a very good storyteller. And Ron Howard did an interview, and Henry Winkler's done interviews, and lots of the people involved in these shows. Cindy and Penny actually did a joint interview.
Yes, which was great.
And yeah, there's a really good one where there was a writer from Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days, and he completely dishes on the backstage drama on Laverne and Shirley.
It was Lowell Gantz. Was it not Lowell Gantz?
It might be. It's
Lowell Gantz. I have to tell my Lowell Gantz story. In the biography of Laverne and Shirley, which aired on the Biography Channel, aired on A&E back in the day, he described his first directing gig, which was directing for Laverne and Shirley. And he said it was like losing his virginity to a mean lady.
I love that story. Yeah.
Well, okay, that though brings something up. Where was Babalu Mandel? Mandel? Come on, Lowell Gantz shows up and you don't get Babalu Mandel. What was he, too busy?
I'm guessing. I gotta guess that. I gotta guess what was going on.
Because I always think of those guys as working as a team. And they kept working as a team, after those shows were over. They kept writing movies. I think several of Ron's movies and maybe a couple of of Penny's movies. So
yeah, back when Ron Howard made fun 80s movies and not terrible Oscar bait. I mean, not to be mean, but Hillbilly Elegy is a terrible book, and I don't think it's going to be a very good movie. And I lost a lot of respect for him when I found out he was directing it.
He is? I didn't know.
I did not know that was his next project.
Well, I personally, I want to just go on the record and say that I do not blame Ron Howard for Solo, a Star Wars story. That project was a wounded beast. He just came to take it to the vet to have it put down.
I've heard good things about it. I've heard bad things about it, but it's got to be better than Hillbilly Elegy. It's going to be. Seriously. There's an entire section in that book where the author complains about poor people having cell phones.
Oh boy, it's one of those books. Awesome.
I'm one of like 5 people who have not read that book.
Well, I will recommend Frost Nixon, which Ron directed. I liked a lot. I thought that film was terrific, and it was my favorite film that year. And I thought Ron did a wonderful job of directing it. I those Da Vinci Code movies, I couldn't get into those either.
No, not at all. Yeah, and I did like his Rush. I felt was pretty good. The race car driving thing, the Formula One racers.
Oh yeah.
With Hemsworth and Brule. I just looked to back up again because I forgot who was in it. That was the only problem. I remember Chris Hemsworth was in it, but couldn't remember who else was in it. And I guess that's the thing with Ron is that a lot of his films, I feel like since like the mid 2000s have been pretty forgettable. Like it's kind of the.
When he stopped working with like Lowell Gantz and Babalu Mandel, and he stopped making those movies that people like associate with him. People think of
And he made a movie that won him an Oscar. So.
Oh yeah, what was it? It was Beautiful Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful Mind. And that kind of changed everything.
I mean, I can't believe that still makes me like in shock. I mean, this is I will leave this tangent here, but I can't believe Akiva Goldsman has an Oscar. This is the guy who wrote the Lost in Space movie from '98. For goodness sake. Come on. And now they're trusting it with all the Star Trek. Anyway, I'm done. Sorry.
Well, that's the thing about Garry Marshall was that they didn't dwell on, but it was true. Garry was never a critical darling. His shows generally did not win Emmys. In 11 seasons, Happy Days won 1 Emmy. It was for editing.
Wow.
Which is one more Emmy than Baywatch has.
But Mork and Mindy, nothing. Laverne and Shirley, nothing.
They got 1 nomination for costumes. 1 nomination, didn't win. I think it was costumes.
Nominated for costumes. Well, they had great costumes on there.
Yeah.
But he had worked on the other side of the critical tracks. I mean, Dick Van Dyke Show got not only good ratings, but it got good reviews. It got Emmys.
Mm-hmm.
Odd Couple got Emmys and it got good reviews. But he was told by someone else in the writing profession, he talked about writing for Lucy in the 60s, and he felt a little bit after working on Dick Van Dyke that Lucy was maybe a little beneath him critically. you know, because he had worked on this smart show. It was the kind of show that critics talk up and they give Emmys to. And now he's writing slapstick comedy for Lucy. And somebody said to him, Garry, the Lucy shows that you're writing now, they are going to like pay your mortgage, you know? So and so that changed his perspective on things. And then, you know, he liked the fact that Odd Couple was a critically respected show, but what he really wanted was, you know, it was pay his bills, and he wanted to make stuff that people really liked. But Garry's movies never got good reviews. I mean, I don't even think Beaches or Pretty Woman got great reviews.
No, I don't.
And certainly the Princess Diary movies, those didn't get good reviews. So he was never a critic's darling at all. But
yeah, I think Meg Abbott, the author of the Princess Diaries, in one of the later books, she kind of made a jab at the second movie. Just that, you know, the plot was silly, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, his movies generally are pretty, and shows are pretty silly. You know, I noticed that in comparing Young Doctors in Love to Laverne and Shirley, clearly Garry thought that one of the funniest things in the world was like a Murphy bed going up and then throwing people around. I was like, there was like 5 minutes of Laverne and Shirley being thrown around by a Murphy bed, and then they go to Young Doctors in Love, and again it's the same thing. So I was like, this guy, you know, I'm sure he just thought that was funny. It was just what genuinely struck him as funny. So
hey,
well,
thankfully,
everything behind the scenes. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, just real quick joke was, goodness gracious, I'm glad nobody showed him a Rube Goldberg machine, or else he would have probably killed his actress with something like that. And it's like, all right, we're gonna have this bed, fling him over into this bed over there. Well. They're gonna be bounced off of this into a bathtub, and they're gonna slip out of the bathtub and into this bed.
Well, that was one thing that was great about Laverne and Shirley that they did, which is that Penny and Cindy were just totally up for the physical comedy, and they would just let themselves be thrown around. And Cindy was especially brave because she was a tiny lady, and she was like, don't worry about it, throw me around, I'm up for it. So
there is actually a specific quote that Garry said that she told him. She said, I'm little, so I've got to be fierce. She said.
Yeah. So that definitely worked. One thing I'm hoping comes from the happy days of Garry Marshall is a renewed interest in Garry and his work. I don't know if there's any miracle that will get Garry shows, you know, onto streaming.
Yeah, God, I need this. Yeah. We need it. We all need it. We're just like,
yeah. The thing is, most of what I had heard about Happy Days was from references from other stuff, like when Fonzie showed up on an episode of The Simpsons as an example of one of the dropouts who was coming back because of the heat wave, or one episode of Family Guy that I watched when I was way too young, which was all about Griffin starting a church devoted entirely to
Church of the Fonz.
The Fonz is the Fonz religion.
Yeah, just stuff like that. So it's kind of like you absorb this information through osmosis, but you don't actually experience it firsthand. And it's like, you know, you should be able to experience it firsthand if you want.
Well, I think we're in an era. This is the era of popular culture that I call the jangling keys era of popular culture, where you have to sort of jangle stuff in front of people's faces, like, you know, parents jangling keys in front of babies. And if it's not right there in front of the baby's face, they're never going to see it. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to have to go looking for Happy Days, they're never going to do it. So you're going to have to get it on platforms that people already know. The way I saw Happy Days was when it was in syndication, and it would just run, you know, Monday through Friday, once a week, every day at 5 or something. It would just run every day. But those spots are all taken up by, you know, the King of Queens now and Friends and stuff like that. I mean,
time moved on.
And if you look at, I looked at Nick at Night recently. It's literally all like Everybody Loves Raymond and Friends, and
I noticed that. Oh God, that
used to be George Lopez all the time. George Lopez all the time.
So, like, if these shows, if you don't jangle them in front of people's faces like a parent jangling keys in front of a baby, people are never ever going to see them. So, I don't know how to get this to CBS Paramount, but that was I thought about that.
I tweeted about it.
Do you think ABC must have had to pay CBS for the rights to show these clips?
Yeah. They definitely had to have. They definitely had to have.
Which is bitter irony. But on the other hand, ABC is doing all these live readings of old sitcoms.
Yeah.
And, they've done The Jeffersons, All in the Family, Good Times. And I'm thinking what needs to happen is a live reading of Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, go ahead. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
There's one story that it starts on Happy Days and ends on Laverne and Shirley.
Yep.
And I thought
you're probably not talking about Are you talking about Shotgun Wedding? The one where Richie and Fonzie disguise themselves in a cow suit to sneak onto a farm so they can make out with the farmer's daughters, and then they have to pretend that they're marrying Laverne and Shirley so that they know.
Because the girls are camping nearby.
I can't believe I remember that. I actually remember. I remember watching that on Nick at Night in the 90s. I didn't know. I think it was. I probably had the flu at the time, so I don't remember exactly why. But oh my god!
The one I'm remembering is much more benign than that. It's just where Jayawardena Power comes back on to Happy Days, and she has a baby, and then on the next show, Laverne and Shirley actually babysit for the baby, and I think they lose the baby somewhere.
Yeah, no, I know what happens. They take care of the baby. They're watching the baby. They got an eye on the baby. What happens is one of the girls gets a date, and then the date calls it to cancel. So the other girl has to go get her. So they leave the baby with Lenny and Squiggy. Never leave a baby with Lenny and Squiggy.
Okay.
Maybe multiple people do this. Actually, it works out okay in the end. So they're watching the baby. Heckle and Jekyll is on the TV screen. The girls come back. The baby's gone. And he said, and they asked Squiggy what they did with the baby, and he said, well, the father came and took it, and Shirley tries to strangle Squiggy to death, and it turns out it's true. That's how it ends.
Yeah. That would probably be a better choice than the cow suit one.
Although now you've put the cow suit image into my mind, and now I can't think of anything other than the cow suit. So,
I know the selling point of that two-parter is that, oh, hey, Richie and Fonzie and Shirley and Laverne are getting married, but
not
the cow
really.
Suit is what sticks with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, obviously.
And then it's awkward. Selling that romance at this point, it was 5 seasons deep for Laverne and Shirley, and as how deep it was for Happy Days. At this point, Richie was with Lori Beth. Carmine and Shirley were a really strong thing, stronger than they had been in previous seasons. So trying to sell your audience on that happening is kind of awkward in a way.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think ABC was pretty shameless at the time in coming up with big events that would get people to tune in. And they were all about those promos, being narrated by Ernie Anderson. They would have Ernie Anderson narrate some very hyperbolic promo. And that's why, we just covered the graduation from season 4 when Richie and Fonzie graduated from high school. And they turned that into 2 episodes when I don't know that they necessarily needed to.
But at least we got an Anson Williams music video.
Yeah, we did.
That is an amazing plus. That's a wonderful plus.
That is amazing. Cool. That is a wonderful plus. So both episodes are really fun, but they definitely could have condensed it down into one show. And obviously with Fonzie Loves Pinky, they dragged it out to 3 shows. I think we got a 3-parter coming up next season.
Is that the ranch one?
Oh, yes.
We start with a 3-parter.
It's a very special 3-parter, too. It's the one that defined a generation.
It's the one where I have to say J the S. I don't even like to say the whole name out loud. They actually include the J the S footage at the end of the Happy Days with Garry Marshall, because of course they have to.
It's iconic.
I tweeted that in all caps knowing you were here.
Well, they own up to it now. I mean, now when Henry has actually gotten to the point where he's actually sick of talking about it because he's been interviewed about it so much. And I think that the ultimate statement on that was when he was on Arrested Development, and he literally jumps over another shark. There's just a tiny dead shark on a pier, and he jumps over that. So
with what, like his feet or a skateboard? What are we talking about here?
It's small enough that he can just like awkwardly hop over it. So
Garry actually had,
but you got to see the clip from just, I don't know, Google Arrested Development, Jump the Shark.
The first 3 seasons of Arrested Development are very good, except for the one very transphobic episode.
But they did. There was one big. I didn't know if it was like a collage or what, but there was like all the cast members of all the Garry Marshall shows seemed to be like gathered outside of Paramount Studios. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that special?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, because that was when I noticed like, oh, Paramount Pictures, and I just started Googling to make sure I could make notes about Paramount Pictures and the connection with the television stuff. So I have notes.
Well, okay. Paramount Pictures, the studio buildings are very important to Happy Days because that's Jefferson High School in the TV show. They just use it as Jefferson High. And in season 8 of Laverne and Shirley, they just blatantly have Laverne walking through Paramount. You see the Paramount buildings in the background. There's no longer anyone for her to do Schlemiel Schlemazel.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I saw that. The clip. Yeah.
It's the most depressing sight. In a way, it's cute, and in a way, it's depressing.
Well, she leads a group of kids, like in saying the chant with her, and in the background, you just see Paramount in the background. So they didn't even try and disguise it.
They gave as much effort as it deserved.
They were like, the thing that bothers me about that is the sitcom leading the group of kids across the street. That is Mary Richards from the Mary Tyler Moore Show. She did that in the credits. That was Mary's thing. It can't also be Laverne's thing.
Yeah. What I was about to say about that was that Penny fought so hard against doing season 8. She literally tried to hide it in a house so Paramount wouldn't force her to do season 8, and they threatened to sue her. So she fought.
Well,
come to think of it, Laverne was the Penny Marshall appeared on Blansky's Beauties, but Cindy Williams did not. Yeah. And I wonder if that was a contractual thing or just a case of, Gary's her brother. She's going to do him a solid.
I think it was, in that case, it was a solid. I think it was like, I think everybody just felt sorry for Blansky's Beauties and went on there out of pity. But they don't even. But okay. But in that big group shot of all the Paramount, of all the Garry Marshall people at Paramount, you do see the cast of Making It with David Naughton, and I was like, and Making It is not as bad as its reputation.
It's not as bad as its title.
Making It is
a show. A couple episodes.
It's not bad at all. The theme song was a monster hit. It was a huge hit on the charts. And but the show is not terrible. It certainly doesn't deserve to be listed like along with Me and the Chimp and stuff as like one of the worst shows of all time. Me and the Chimp definitely does deserve to be listed there. I wonder if any of you, I tried to get Peter to watch this, but without great success, was Angie.
Oh, I've heard of Angie. I've heard of Angie. I've seen a couple episodes of Angie. It's okay. It's one of those. It's okay.
Peter, I forced Peter to watch some of it, but I don't think that was.
Interest. I'm not convinced he isn't a serial killer.
He's Robert Hayes. He's Robert Hayes from Airplane.
Yeah.
So it's Robert Hayes from Airplane.
Yeah. And his deadpan effect was used to great effect in that movie, but like in Angie, it just comes across as creepily intense.
Oh dear.
Well, I thought the good part of Angie was actually with Angie's family. Doris Roberts, later of Everybody Loves Raymond, plays her mom, and Deborah Lee Scott of Mary Hartman and Match Game plays her sister. And I thought there was maybe something interesting in that little apartment that they shared together. I thought that was kind of an interesting maybe setting for a show. But obviously Angie didn't go, and I think it lasted 2 seasons. So I think it lasted as long as Joni Loves Chachi. So it went 2 seasons. And we just talked about Blansky's Beauties and all the attempts to save it and revamp it and retool it for something else. So
because it started out as a 70s jiggle show a la Charlie's Angels with less action, where the lead was sitcom veteran Nancy Blansky, and then they retooled it into. They got rid of Nancy Blansky and Nancy Walker is the actress. Nancy Blansky is the character. Sorry,
right.
They retooled it in. They got rid of Nancy Walker as Nancy Blansky and retooled it into Legs, which went all in on the sex appeal. And then they retooled it again as Who's Watching the Kids for kind of the TGIF era, where you've got like some plucky kids and their adult supervisors.
Yeah, and so, they had
I don't know if it was before or after Full House, but I feel like it should have been after Full House, at least in spirit, if not in actuality.
You know, it was. They also added Jim Belushi, if that sweetens the deal any.
It does not.
And they kept Linda Goodfriend, and Linda worked on a lot of projects for Garry. Linda is even in Exit to Eden, bless her heart. She came back to do Exit to Eden. I can't imagine what she plays in it, but she's in there somewhere. I don't like to think of Linda Goodfriend being in that film, but she's in there somewhere. But yeah, I would say overall, even though it is not very journalistically rigorous, The Happy Days of Garry Marshall was a pretty satisfying viewing experience, and it made me want to revisit Garry's shows and movies. So I was overall very pleased with it. So any other thoughts that people had on it?
I was going to say, what was the one moment that touched you the most during this special? What was the one moment that touched you guys most?
Wow.
I would say there was a sequence involving Garry's death when people were coming to visit him in the hospital, and all these stars from his movies and TV shows were showing up, and they were still getting genuinely emotional thinking about that experience. And I will admit that I got a little bit choked up during that sequence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to say, I would definitely say that would be, I mean, for me, what happened was as the transition from television to movies takes place in the retrospective, you notice that the TV side of things, especially with the clips, especially with the comedy, because the work is much happier, it feels much lighter. And so when it makes the jump to cinema, both the people sharing their experiences are sharing, I think, sometimes more intense emotional experiences. So that I found to be much more moving and much more genuine as it went on. But yeah, I would have to say, I think that was kind of the kicker. I don't know if there was any one moment. Actually, you know, I think the one that first really got me like, bam, you know, straight to the heart. Fittingly, I say that phrase, was Julia Roberts' story about the gift he gave her at the end of Pretty Woman. And it was that that necklace in the shape of heart.
Oh, yeah.
To know that she would always be, she would always have value and that she would always be loved.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And
I admit that I got a little bit, like, I got choked up at the end too, where it was just this retrospective of things that he had worked on and of clips from things that he had worked on. And even before that, I thought it was very, very sweet when his daughter was talking about how her parents were married for 52 years and that how rare that is in their industry. Because because it's show business, and of course you think of people getting divorced every couple of years, and of course they had and more than that, they seem to have a very loving, functional relationship, and so it's not just that they stayed together; it was that they seemed to genuinely love each other, and that was why they stayed together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, his widow, I thought, was one of the stars of this show.
Yeah.
I thought
Absolutely.
she's incredible.
Yeah,
Totally.
that's out of all the people interviewed, I mean, obviously there's movie stars and directors I would love to talk to, but Barbara, hands down, is the one out of that group I want to meet the most.
Yes.
Yeah, it was. I almost was thinking that maybe when somebody started doing the research for a project like this, and maybe they ran into Barbara and she started talking, that's when you start to think, oh, maybe we have a show here. Maybe we have like a special here.
Yeah.
Is that, she had so many great stories, and she was obviously still so proud of her husband, and they had such a great marriage that that's when you start to feel like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And I think they kind of built the special around her.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the guy who actually wrote and directed this thing, had you heard of him? John Scheinfeld.
I had not, and
No.
thanks for the reminder. I
No,
need to look
either.
that up.
And John actually made a ton of pop culture documentaries, including some that I had seen. And
Oh.
because he had made a documentary about Harry Nilsson called "Who Is Harry Nilsson?"
Oh. I've heard of the.
And embarrassingly, because he couldn't get her on this show, he made a documentary about Bette Midler. So what was going on there, John?
Oh.
You have to wonder at that point. It's like, those experiences.
Oh, and the other one I haven't seen, but it's probably the most famous thing, is the U.S. versus John Lennon, which is another
oh my
documentary.
goodness, yeah, I've heard so much about that one.
So the one that I had seen was "Who Is Harry Nilsson?" What did you think of it? What did you all think of it as a piece of filmmaking?
So I have my
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Just
Gloves off.
I'm gonna use my words. I'm gonna use my words.
Nope.
It's a case of where, if comparing how I like to usually work within, especially editing documentary narratives and kind of promotional narratives, I do like to have something that's perhaps a little more fluid. It did at times feel, it gets better, I think, as it goes on, because I think they prioritize the movie star portion of the second half. So a lot of the early stuff gets kind of choppy. So that's definitely technique wise what I can see. I have some notes actually about that, which is it's a case of where you sort of feel, it feels as definitely there's having to get like a rush to the good stuff, which I felt was a tad unfortunate, because when it comes to, media history and focusing on people who create stuff, it's really common to know their goal period. And that's a very typical like biopic thing of like, we're going to do the Johnny Cash thing about the Folsom period, or we're going to do the Elton, and that's why like, movies like Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man, they focus on like these key aspects. Like I'm intrigued by like, when you decide to find some more abstract or some simple small scale thing. But that being said, I mean, technique wise, I thought it was really good. They have an amazing sense of timing. I mean, whoever was working with as the editor, because with this type of work, that's a very intimate creative relationship between the director and the editor, where they're inspiring each other, because I'm saying this having just come off of a tribute band documentary from last January is when we wrapped up. And we basically, that was the thing, is she would give me a note and I would have an idea, and we would just kind of figure out together what it is. But I would say that ultimately my biggest takeaway, cinematically, is that as much as it feels like this kind of like emotional, like almost like assault after a while, because it's like there's so much like it's the same way you get like explosions in a Michael Bay movie. You're getting emotional,
Right.
like, oh God, like this little heartwarming thing, and then like the story of Chris Pine, and he shows up on set and there's no one there, and he's asking the makeup artist.
Oh, and the parade.
The parade, and then like out of nowhere you get the story of the parade, and you realize what that because as goofy as that is, there's the heartfelt reason why that's happening, which is that he's saying, what is it, making movies is hard, we might as well have fun doing it, and like those sort of things just kind of so I feel like that build up, it earns that, because I guess what I mean is, in the hands of someone who is, I think, as you were saying, like it was very sincere. I think someone more insincere or more directly manipulative wouldn't have earned that montage at the conclusion about the end of his life. Because I mean, it's, I've heard a lot of stories, I mean, we, as people who love folks in media, actors and filmmakers and writers, we've heard a lot of stories recently of people who've passed on in the last few years. And it reminds me of like, of course I have to, if I'm going to be on here, I'm going to have to mention some horror director, which is when George Romero passed away a few years ago.
Right.
Someone mentioned that he got to go, people were like, mourning his loss. And someone brought up, I think it might have been someone who knew him actually, that said he was able to pass away peacefully, having said goodbye to his friends. And when he knew he was going to go, he said, put on my favorite soundtrack and just let me go. And so he got to say goodbye to his wife and to all of his closest colleagues and go out peacefully in his sleep, listening to his favorite music from his favorite film. And it's like those kind of stories, carry, and that's what it feels. That's what I love about the way that concludes, the way they do, as much as it's intense. Richard Gere even saying like, I surprised myself how much I still feel this.
Yeah.
But it's a case of it. I guess what I mean is it gets to a wonderful conclusion. I've had this note. I've been sitting on this for the whole time.
No, go ahead.
Is I feel like the biggest takeaway is that this is not just to honor someone who was great to a lot of people, but I feel the goal was to inspire us to want to be like him, to aspire to that level of heart and family and connection and dedication, and to not do it because you want them to love you, but because the world is very difficult and we all feel very unloved, and he just wanted other people to feel loved. And that's what was my takeaway. So,
yeah. That phrases it so much better than I could have.
Yeah, that kind of says it all. I did come away from it wanting to be positive and wanting to create positive things after that, Of course, within an hour, I was back on Twitter just being a dick, as I usually am. But it makes you want to, it's a real case for creating positivity and creating positive art. It's not to be too lofty. It's almost like Sullivan's Travels, So it's a little bit like that at the end, where the Mickey Mouse cartoon makes Sullivan realize, the importance of creating populist art. And so, that was Garry all the way. I would say as a piece of filmmaking, it's pretty plain. It's not really artful. There's documentarians who get way more into in the way of their subject than he does, than John Scheinfeld does. And I would imagine, based on this and Who is Harry Nilsson, which is all like talking heads and people sharing stories about Harry, that I would imagine that John tends to be a pretty low tech or low key, low concept documentarian, not one of these people who very much he didn't make himself part of the story at all. So, that's what I would say, is that he wants the material to shine and not the technique of making the documentary. So it's not a flashy special at all. I think it's very plain, but I think he gets the job.
If I may, to interject, is that although perhaps not as creatively flourishing, it tries to do in some ways what Garry also himself did, is that you find a niche and you try to do it to the best of your ability. And although there certainly are places for improvement, I agree. I do feel like the edit was at times incredibly smooth, which some documentaries do not do very well.
Yeah. I know nothing about filmmaking, but I found it made me feel things, so
got the job done then.
Yeah.
The one thing I wish could have been in there, and maybe they just couldn't license it, was Garry's performance in the movie Lost in America. He's so good in that, and when he died, I think that was about 3 years ago, that was one of the clips that was circulating the most on social media, and I know Albert Brooks tweeted about that, and I thought, that would have been so nice to have that clip, but obviously you can't have everything, because where would you put it, honestly, so you can't have everything. And obviously when you have a career where you made all these sitcoms and all these movies, and you only have really 2 hours to tell everything. Obviously a lot of stuff doesn't make it in, and they would have to pay extra for that, and maybe they didn't feel like it. So, oh well. Garry actually became kind of a good character actor in his own way. He didn't do a lot of acting, but he was basically being himself, and he's funny being himself. He's funny as himself, basically, in A League of Their Own. And he played a network executive on Murphy Brown, and he was pretty funny doing that.
Yep.
And he did a great Simpsons episode where he plays the owner of a zoo.
Yeah.
I was looking up his credits while we were talking, and one of the things I love is he's one of the studio executives, or the studio executive from The Majestic, which is also, which is wonderful, and it explains why I found his voice so familiar.
Yeah, he really, because of those performances, he became a public figure, and they didn't really. There wasn't time to focus on that. We talked a little bit about his recently on our podcast. We talked a little bit about his role on Blansky's Beauties, where he gave himself a regular role.
Oh boy!
Yeah, he played this mob guy who regularly talked to Nancy, and it was honestly, I think he's one of maybe the best part of Blansky's Beauties, which is admittedly a very low bar, but still.
Yeah, he plays sort of like this was back when I guess the mob owned Vegas. So he owns the hotel, I guess, but he's also vaguely a gangster, and he always has kind of thugs around him. And he's this sort of taciturn, menacing kind of guy. I think he wears sunglasses inside all the time. And it's not a typical Garry Marshall part, but he's funny in it. And yeah, he's probably the best part of Blansky's Beauties. But that was the only real howling omission that I saw was I really, really wish they had licensed a clip from Lost in America.
I was actually surprised that we got as much of Young Doctors in Love as we did. That was good. That was great.
Hell yeah, I got like 5 minutes. I think.
Yeah.
They had Michael McKean telling stories about it. It was great. I was like, if you'd asked, they skipped over Flamingo Kid, which I think was oh well, but they gave 5 minutes, I think, to Young Doctors in Love. And hey, if John Scheinfeld went to bat for Young Doctors in Love, then more power to you, John. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Flamingo Kid gets mentioned briefly, which I'm glad it did, because I had forgotten. I was looking that up as well. That was also the first film to receive the PG-13 rating. So hey, you got to be a part of a little bit of cinema history there.
Wow, groundbreaker. Wow, but that's kind of a sweet, quirky little film that maybe does not get all the attention that it deserves. But oh well.
Yeah. Looking at the cast, I definitely need to give it a look. I mean, if you got Matt Dillon and Elizondo, Richard Crenna, even Fisher Stevens in there, I'm definitely going to give that a look.
And I was speaking, you just mentioned him. I was so glad to have. You couldn't do this without Hector Elizondo.
He was wonderful,
and Hector was so good in this. And they didn't tell the story that I wanted him to tell, which was that Laverne and Shirley drove him off the air in the 70s.
Yeah, that's right. I saw you mentioning that.
And then he and Garry Marshall became regular partners.
They became buddies, and they didn't know each other at the time. But in the old days, Hector Elizondo was one of the first Hispanic actors to get a lead role in an American primetime show, and they put it up against Laverne and Shirley, and right off the air, gone. Yeah. So
were they intentionally setting it up to fail?
CBS didn't know what to do against Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. Yeah. They just sent all kinds of shows to the slaughter. This season, I've been researching, and I keep finding more about it, a show called Who's Who, where they put Dan Rather and Charles Kuralt and a woman named Barbara Hauer in a news show against Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, and they're just getting their asses kicked every week. So they didn't know what to do, but they kept trying.
Sorry, go ahead. I was gonna say ultimately what ended up leading specifically the downfall of Laverne and Shirley is they moved it away from Happy Days. They moved it out of that block, and they thought it could, lead its own night. And things went downhill at season 5. They did the California move, and things were okay. And season 8 is all I gotta say.
Well, now then this gets into an issue. The Laverne and Shirley infamous time change gets mentioned on Mork and Mindy. I think Mork actually talks about it. So for him, is Laverne and Shirley a TV show, or is he in another dimension, or what?
Okay.
It is.
Here's my theory.
Okay.
Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley exist within the Marshallverse as TV shows created by Richie Cunningham based on his growing up.
So he went on and turned his experiences into shows, sort of like the guy from the Waltons. Turned his shows. Okay, I gotcha. So in their universe, because obviously, in our timeline, 20 years or so have transpired between Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, and Mork and Mindy would be taking place like 20 years later, or 15 years later. Mm-hmm. So, there's also a fictional show within a show called Laverne and Shirley. Okay. And it also had its time slot changed.
Interesting.
Okay.
Okay. I can see that.
Oh, but now that we're bringing up Mork and Mindy, another person I was so glad to see, and she was just a delight, and this was Pam Dauber.
Oh, she was wonderful. Yeah. Oh, man.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pam is...
Yes.
Yeah, actually...
Get Pam Dauber! Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mork and Mindy was actually my first Marshall show. I was probably like 4 or 5. I was about 5, I think, when I first saw episodes of it, and my parents loved it. So they were like, Christopher, you got to watch this. So yeah.
Well, I came away from that saying, like, get Pam Dauber another show. Get her on something. Get her on something. Get her another show.
Yeah.
The last time I think she did anything.
She's 100% Pam Dauber. Get her on something. Yeah. So
I think the last time she did anything was that guest spot on Robin Williams' last show.
That's right. That's the last thing I remember was her doing that guest spot on Robin's show that he did with Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Yep. And it got canceled after the first season. Yeah.
So I was like, Pam is like ready to go. She's like good to go. Like, put her in something. Come on, networks. There's so many channels. There's so many streaming services. There has to be a place in this world for Pam Dauber. Put her on something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This.
Yeah.
All of this.
I did have I had one more thing to mention about Mork and Mindy. This is a kind of a personal piece of trivia, but I thought was kind of interesting. Was I'm fairly certain that the commercial for Star Wars that they used to set up the Mork and Mindy segment, I think is the same TV spot that my mother described to me shot for shot in detail when I was a kid, saying, this is how I saw Star Wars for the first time. Was all I saw was this one commercial, and these were the 3 things that I saw in it. It was, and it took me years to track down the final spot to and actually track it down. But that was cute to see. Like, that was the one.
Wow,
that is amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so it's just,
so cool.
But it's cute because usually most of the TV spots you find are the ones that are more common, and so you would have to like track down the ones that were kind of towards the end of its run, I think.
Well, this special, Happy Days of Garry Marshall, if nothing else, is this great collection of footage, and some of these outtakes I had never seen.
Oh my God,
so
those were amazing.
Yeah,
so good.
They clearly had the keys to the kingdom here. John Steinfeld.
When Anne Hathaway was talking about how she kind of hoped that Julie Andrews would flub a line because then Julie Andrews would curse and she'd get to hear Julie Andrews curse.
Yeah.
That. I wanted 20 minutes of that. I mean, I wanted 20 minutes of Julie Andrews cursing on the set of Princess Diaries.
Julie Andrews saying shit.
Yeah, there needs to be like a documentary which is like all like the crisp, elegant ladies of cinema, and their foul mouth, things, like clips of Julie Andrews swearing. It is Judi Dench, right? That is the cross stitching.
Yeah.
Like, have those compiled together, just give me an hour of that and I will pay $15 for that.
That was wonderful stuff. we get some bloopers. I think there were some bloopers, but that could obviously, unfortunately, the bloopers from Happy Days that are on YouTube right now, they're like, it's stereotypically, filmed on a potato. It looks like, it's like 9th generation copies. So I'm sure there's much crisper versions of these things out there, but there's some great ones, including one where Marion Ross and Henry Winkler are just making out through an entire scene.
Yeah. I specifically remember that from Dick Clark. Dick Clark showed that one like multiple times.
Yes, that was a classic from the TV bloopers of Practical Jokes.
Yeah.
And Henry and Marion are just ignoring the scene going on, and everybody else is like doing their lines and stuff. And I have to imagine there had to have been all kinds of mishaps on Laverne and Shirley as well.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up. They have reels. There are several reels on YouTube. You can actually watch them in Shout Factory, similar potato quality, and there's actually a blooper reel on one of the DVD sets, but I don't think it was remastered. I can't remember. Probably my favorite blooper of all time from the show was when David can't get out the word steam ream the pits. He can't get the words out, and everybody's cracking up, and everybody's losing. My other favorite is from Perfidy in Blue from season 7, where David was apparently sticking his tongue in Penny's mouth and cracking her up when they were supposed to be kissing. And he's just like losing. She's just like losing it, and she says when they come back from the reel, I think somebody was trying to stick their tongue in my mouth. That's what I remember. The bloopers.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's all I have to say about the Happy Days of Garry Marshall. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I was glad I watched it. So
we're gonna. So
if
wait,
we keep
we're
talking
gonna
for another 30 minutes. We can match the length of the special.
pretty much.
Yeah, I know.
But okay, I guess because I was wondering, like, are we really going to end it on the Freddy Krueger tongue in the mouth, as a last subject to discuss?
Absolutely, that is what Garry would have wanted. Garry would want you to end on a laugh. Okay. The thing that we've noticed in Happy Days, and it's going to come up huge in a show that we're going to record in a couple of weeks, is that Garry would force happy endings onto episodes of Happy Days, even when they were totally not warranted. Like, he could not end an episode of Happy Days on a down note. So, like, something wacky is going to happen in the last minute of every Happy Days episode so that they can go into, these are such happy days, and then they can go into the credits.
Yeah.
So he would completely end it on the dumbest, goofiest joke possible. So
I guess that's
that
it.
is well. If you have calming words of sage wisdom that you think that, they ended the special on calming words of sage wisdom, but
the only thing for some reason that comes to mind is drink more Ovaltine. That's all I got, man.
I was gonna say something about how I came into this kind of sitcom universe. Like, when I was 3 years old, Laverne and Shirley was my favorite show. I was a very, 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 very tiny little girl, and I used to watch it rapidly. It was just right at the end, right before season 8, mind you. This is right before season 8, mind you. And to me, like, the reason why I keep coming back to these shows, I came back to it in my 20s when they were showing the show on TBS, and then Block Party Summer was happening at Nick at Night. I came back to it now, like, during this whole pandemic mess and everything else, because it's so, like, it's comforting in a way. It's extremely, like, it's like sitting there wrapped in a blanket, and that's what I think of when I think of Garry Marshall's work. It's like being comforted. It's like sitting there wrapped up in a warm quilt, and everything in the end is going to be okay. And that's what I think of when I think of this.
Yeah, Garry's shows came on during an ugly time in American history. We'd just been through Watergate and Vietnam.
As opposed to all those pretty times in American
history. An especially ugly time in American history. We were just coming off of the Vietnam War, and we just had a president quit for the first time in American history. There was gas shortages and Watergates and Vietnam's going on all over the place.
Yeah,
and
actually, I have a note about that Ron Howard says. Here we go. The innocent birth of the rock and roll period. I'm like, oh boy, revisionism.
yeah, like as much as I like Happy Days, there you could maybe make like it probably wouldn't be much of a stretch to make it into something sinister. Like, weren't the 1950s a great and wonderful time if you were white and middle class
Well,
and
we-
male
we-
and
we have-
straight?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you have that's what you have that for, like, American Graffiti, basically. You know.
Well,
Yeah.
but American Graffiti, I think, has a dark subtext to it. You know,
yeah.
I think
Oh God, yeah.
I think the whole
Like,
point of that
the
movie is
Fonzie
like,
figure the Fonzie figure in American Graffiti is explicitly kind of pathetic.
Mhm.
and doomed. He's got
Yeah.
bad. Well, the whole point of that movie is these kids have no idea what's going to happen to them
Yeah.
in the next
There's
few
also
years.
the very,
Like,
very creepy subplot with Mackenzie Phillips's character.
Oh
Yes.
God. Oh
Yes.
God.
God.
and
God,
but
it's been so long since I watched that movie.
what they mean is, but the whole point of that movie is like, these characters are basically about to be hit hard
Yeah.
by the 1960s. They have no idea what's coming up, and we know, but they don't know.
Yeah.
So that's the irony of that film. In Happy Days, they really do try and concentrate on the happier aspects of it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why right now is the time for a Gary Marshall comeback. America needs Gary Marshall more than ever, because I don't know.
Give us streaming rights. Give us streaming rights. Give it.
I don't know if you've heard, but maybe some of you have heard there was a pandemic that happened recently. So right now would be a perfect time for the cheerful escapism
Yeah.
of Exit to Eden. And
The
we're
good
all
old days
trying.
when you could actually leave your house and
Yes,
people
when we
wouldn't
were all
die.
You could dance with strangers, and you could meet
Yes.
people and go on dates, and
Yeah.
and worry about making it to the bar, and
all these things, and we can't do any of the stuff that's in the shows or any of the movies. I guess we could die on a beach from beaches. I think that's
Oh,
the one
no.
thing that's the one thing we would be allowed to do. Nothing else we can do. So if people want fantasy escape, watch Pretty Woman, where
Mhm.
I don't even know if the prostitution industry is going to recover from this. I don't know.
Oh man.
You can't-
OnlyFans.
And stuff.
I mean,
Yeah.
although granted, a lot of people are trying to get it shut down because they hate sex work and sex workers.
Oh, that's yes,
So-
yes, because we have to ban all of those things. Yes, it's not as if the spousal abuse it needs to be stopped, or child abuse needs to be
Right.
stopped, and the problem with mental health. And sorry,
They should remake Pretty Woman and have it all entirely take place in two completely different locations, and it all takes place over the internet.
it would be pretty. It would be
Now that I
pretty-
say that, it sounds terrible. Don't do
Now
that.
it'd be Pretty Cam Girl or something. Oh God, it should
Oh,
be
yeah.
a cam.
Oh boy, yeah, okay, so yeah, because that's right. There was that film with what was it, Elijah Wood and Sasha Grey, I think it was, that horror film.
Was there a Cam Girl horror film?
There is
No,
a
there's-
Cam Girl horror movie
There's multiple ones.
on Netflix.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
multiple Cam Girl horror movies. Where have I been? Oh my! I'm getting the wrong recommendations. Clearly, they're recommending the wrong movies to me. If there's multiple Cam Girl horror, how did we get in Cam Girl horror movies from Gary Marshall?
That's what our tangents are like on our pod.
This is what happens when you invite me on these things. I think you'll have learned your
Oh,
lesson.
my
No.
Chris,
Like-
you are the wind beneath our wings.
Oh, that song. I have issues with that song. I have issues with the lyrics of that song. And Peter, you pointed it out. It's because the song is self-aggrandizing at the worst possible time. Your friend is dying. Don't compliment yourself for 5
You stayed
seconds.
here while I went and saw the world.
Yeah.
Oh,
It must have been.
gosh.
If you can read those lyrics like in a mean voice, it totally works. It must have been cold there in my shadow. It's so mean. It's the meanest song. It's the meanest song ever written. It's the cruelest song. It's like the person's dying and you're making fun of them for not being famous in like their last 5 minutes on Earth. Well, way to go, Bet. I hate that song. I love that movie. I've seen Beaches a bunch of times. Not in years, unfortunately, but I did see it a bunch of times. But I have problems with that song. But they had to use it to be like the emotional climax, I think, of this special. I think it's used that way, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's.
Mhm.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
The last kind of orchestral movement, which is really lovely.
Mm.
If you listen to it, it moves from Happy Days into Laverne and Shirley into Mork and Mindy, and I think there's Beaches in there. There's Wind Beneath My Wings, and then it goes to Princess Diaries. That's the last orchestral suite that ends the documentary.
Yeah, that was really well handled. That was another nice.
I was going to say, sadly, the IMDb information for Happy Days of Garry Marshall isn't up yet, because I would love to know who arranged that piece, because the arrangement of that was beautifully executed.
Yeah, that was one aspect of it that was really, really well handled, and using those themes in sad ways is something that I don't know if Laverne and Shirley does it much.
Yeah.
Happy Days does it all the time. There's a sad version of the Happy Days theme that when something sad happens. Is there one for Laverne and Shirley?
Definitely. They definitely have a sad arrangement of the theme. It gets used at certain moving points during the show. Specifically during the New Year's Eve episode, and I think it's during one of the really super... did they use it during Why Did the Fireman? I'm trying to remember. That's coming. Chris doesn't know about that yet. Chris
I actually accidentally read about that spoiler, so I do know a little bit about what's coming there. That wasn't my fault. Sorry.
By the way, it's totally irrelevant, but it was weird in the special seeing Jeffrey Katzenberg for a few minutes because I had just been seeing all the coverage about the failure of Quibi.
Oh my God, yes.
And Jeffrey Katzenberg blaming it on COVID-19 and not on the fact that it was an idiotically conceived platform to begin with.
Oh man,
6 Degrees of Garry Marshall.
6 Degrees of Garry Marshall, which is another awesome thing that watching this documentary got me to do, was to look up, Eisner and Katzenberg, and then looking up the history of it and realizing that period at Paramount was nuts.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because there were so many people that ended up, I mean, like Don Simpson came out of that, Michael Eisner, Jeffrey, and Katzenberg. And they were, because they were part of, I think, was a Barry Diller's team. And then that was amazing. Like, they already had come out of Bob Evans and then moving into that. And so, seeing Katzenberg in there was interesting. It makes me wonder if that's why, with Katzenberg and Eisner moving off to Disney, why in turn they were able to drag Garry into the film business through like Touchstone Pictures and that type of work. Well,
until I started researching These Days Are Ours, I didn't really know the extent of Michael Eisner's importance to this saga. And of course, Michael is crucial to Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, which you mentioned in your first podcast. You talked about Michael. And so it was very, very appropriate that Michael was there. I didn't quite understand why Jeffrey Katzenberg was there, but Michael Eisner absolutely earned the right to be there. I think Michael Eisner actually deserves the right to be called like an executive producer or co-creator of Happy Days, but he didn't take it. So I would say he didn't take it because, he wanted it to be Garry's show, but he deserves that title. So, he was very much the dad of Happy Days even before it got to Garry. So
if you don't have Michael Eisner in this story, Cindy Williams does not end up playing Shirley Feeney. So,
oh, wow.
He hid that Liberty Williams test in that building. He did that.
Now you reminded me of another story where on American Graffiti, Cindy and Ron would have long waits between camera setups. And Ron would get up and ask the director, George Lucas, questions about filmmaking. And Cindy said, "Oh, Ron, you're wasting your time. Why are you bothering doing this? Why do you care? This is a huge waste of time." And so no one was more surprised than Cindy Williams when Ron Howard became a director. She thought he was a complete nerd for asking George Lucas.
I mean, he was, but that's a good thing.
That's why she directed one episode. That's why she...
But actually, on that note, to swing things back to Garry Marshall, another thing in his credits, which I wish had been talked about as we were saying about the actors, is he even has a cameo, apparently possibly uncredited, in Grand Theft Auto, which is Ron Howard's first film.
Oh, that's awesome! The movie, the movie that I want to see was one that was directed by Jerry Paris, produced by Ron Howard, starring Donnie Most. There's like a Donnie Most starring movie vehicle.
Is that the one that also has Linda Pearl?
It has Linda Pearl in it. Yes, he and Linda Pearl actually made a movie together. They made 2 movies together. There are
gosh.
2 Donnie Most Linda Pearl joints out there. Somebody was financing these things, but that brings it back to the special again. Always, of course, nice to see Anson and Don
And Don,
on the show. They're doing great, and if you haven't seen Harvest Time with Anson and Don, it's on YouTube. It is a extremely dark short film that they just very recently made. Harvest and
about that.
The harvest in Harvest Time refers to the harvesting of organs, if that gives you any hint about the darkness of this. But it is the darkest possible story. But Ron and Donnie Most and Anson Williams are in a movie about organ harvesting. It's on YouTube. Highly recommended. That's all I have to say about it.
So another underground, kind of small little gem of a movie with organ harvesters in it. So it's another Mute situation. Got it. Awesome. On the list now.
It's very talky. I think it was supposed to be originally like a 1-act play that they just did on stage, but then they couldn't tour with it, so they filmed it and uploaded it to YouTube. And it's bleak, but if you wanted to see like a darkest timeline version of Happy Days of what happened to Ralph Malph and Potsy Weber, even though they don't play those characters, you'll get it from Harvest Time. It is wow! It was surprising.
I didn't know that existed.
Okay, there we go. I
did not know.
And I love that it premiered. So Pop Culture Goes the Culture. They put it up on April 1st of this year, which, oh boy.
Yeah, they put it up during a bleak time. On
April Fool's Day.
On April Fool's Day of all things. And some people at the premiere, of course, with the premiere, of course, you can have live chat. And because the subject matter is so dark, and because both Don and Anson just swear a blue streak through the whole thing, some people who were expected to tune in and see Happy Days, they were scandalized and offended by it. But I think everybody on this panel could handle it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely in my case.
So I think now is the time that we need to shoe in a happy ending.
Yes. So please listen to our podcast.
Well, actually, okay, I have one thing I could add. Usually when Lisa and I do our episodes, we out of 10, what would we rate the episode we just watched?
Oh, great. Yeah.
So retrospective, on a scale of 1 to 10, what you giving this one?
I'm giving it an 8.
I'm not really good at rating things on a scale of 1 to 10, but I will also give it an 8. I mean, if you can almost make me cry, then that's an easy 6. And it was very enjoyable. It was a lot of fun seeing all of these people who clearly had a lot of respect and love for Garry Marshall come together to reminisce. So, 8 out of 10.
We got 2 8s.
For me, it's a 9.
Whoa!
Nice. Okay.
I lost it like when Michael said the last thing he said when he saw Garry Marshall was that he thanked him for his life.
Oh my God! We didn't even talk about Michael McKean's interview on there.
Oh, God, he's so good.
It was really good.
It was just nice to see David too.
David, it was so great seeing David, and that's why I recommend the Lenny and Spriggy origin story on YouTube. It's David tells the story. So, so we have 2 8s and a 9.
And I'm gonna rock it home with I'm gonna go ahead and give it an 8.5. And sometimes I do that just to shake things up. But also it's a case of it's on a good day. I would say that because it's something that is I have to be in the right mood and right mindset to watch something like this. Partly because of the fact that it is it's very fluff in the first half. It's really emotional in the second half.
Yeah.
But it's a case of that. I mean, my mom wanted to watch this as well because she, watched these shows when she was young, when she was kind of getting into her 20s, and so it's a case of like she wants to watch it. I'm going to happily watch it again with her. I will definitely recommend it to people who are fans of Garry Marshall. Like anybody who like gets into either of our shows, I would absolutely recommend this piece to, because because I knew so little going into it. This felt like an awesome starter pack, and then doing the research of the last few like basically about the last 24 hours, research.
For sure.
Yeah.
It really it gets you started, and then you get to go into the rabbit hole of Wikipedia and articles and people's Twitter accounts and other podcasts. So it's really good.
That's you point out something amazing about it, which is that if you want a Garry Marshall starter kit, you can't really do better than the Happy Days of Garry Marshall. It's a great place to start with him. So it's a great introduction, sampler platter, if you will, of his shows and movies. So, yeah.
Yeah, really, truly.
Yeah.
All right.
Listen to our podcasts. They're very good.
Mm-hmm.
Night After Night only has 2 episodes out now, I believe.
Three. We just put
3. Oh, you're on 3.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
Rolling for
3
Raspberries
episodes.
just went up today.
Now is a great time to get started with it.
And our show, I think we just posted our 79th or 80th. I think we're about to post our 80th episode.
Wow.
Oh my God, 80 shows.
Man, you both have so much more to go through, right?
Oh my God.
Yes.
We're not even a third of the way. It is like we are trying to dig through a glacier with a spoon, basically, is what we're trying to do here. We're never going to make it, but we are 80 episodes in, and I think our show is. I think we're actually learning how to do it even better than we were when we started. Our first few podcasts, I think, are bad. I think are actually pretty bad. So
we figured it out as we went along.
Yeah. So definitely, if you're coming over from Night After Night, don't start with 1. Start with like 79 and 78 and 77. Start with those. Don't start with 1, please.
Come on, man. You can't be that hard on yourself here. You're supposed to market. You have to market.
I would say I would want to market people to listen to our new ones. I would say that's where I would want to say. I call my old blog post Golden Classics from the archives on my blog. So our first few episodes, I call those Golden Classics as well. So if you enjoy our new ones, then take time to enjoy our Golden Classics from the archives. But please do start with the new ones. You won't miss anything. It's not like a continuity show. It's not like it's not heavily serialized. It's not like, I wouldn't be able to follow this. You'll be able to follow it. We explain everything.
It's not the continuing story of a Cunningham who's gone to the Fawns.
Yeah, it's not at all. So, and even that one, what was that, Veterinarian Hospital?
Veterinarian's Hospital, yeah.
Yeah, like even that, I don't think there's a continuing story.
No, that's part of the joke, I think, because
that's part of the joke is that there isn't one. Right. Well, there's a fake soap opera on SCTV where it does have a continuing story where you do have to follow it from the beginning to the end. So, but anyway, now I'm way off the track. But yeah, definitely listen to both of our shows. And Daniel Budnick was not able to be here, and he has a Happy Days podcast as well. I wish I had a link to it, but look for Eventually Super Train, which is the name of his main podcast, and that will get you a link to his Happy Days podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So Daniel, we tried to work you into this, buddy, but he couldn't make it. So, well.
We talked about this for 2 hours, and we're just now bringing you up.
Yeah, that's a little. I'm a little red in the face about that one. Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel. We forgot about you for these 2 hours because we had cam girl horror movies to talk about.
Yeah, it's fitting because I gotta go watch Grindhouse movies for my other podcast I work on.
All right, I just reviewed a Swedish horror movie yesterday. So
after we're recording, you got to tell me which one.
All right, I will. All right, are we done?
I think we're done. All right, thanks everybody.
All right.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
while I have you on the line, do either of you? There was a Laverne and Shirley pitch pilot that was shot on the set of Happy Days. It's like 15 minutes. Do either of you have it?
It has never surfaced. It has never surfaced, and I want it to surface so badly. I'm pretty sure it never made DVD cut. It's never not anywhere. The only thing that exists are pictures on Getty. There's a ton of pictures on Getty of both versions.
Because there's like a broken like YouTube link, or there's like a broken Daily Motion link. I hate Daily Motion.
Oh no, yeah,
Ugh.
yeah.
Daily Motion is made to like torture you. If you do you hate yourself and want to watch a video, use Daily Motion. But yeah, I keep hoping for that thing to resurface. Well, I had hoped maybe Laverne and Shirley super fans would have it, but oh well.
I want it desperately. I've never seen it. I want that desperately, out there. There was apparently a script that was written in season 7, which was supposed to be the series finale. It existed and was going to be shot. The script is out there, along with the script that I can't remember who wrote for a Laverne and Shirley movie. Never happened.
Wow.
Laverne and Shirley
I'm reading
movie.
that.
Oh my god.
Just reading of that.
All right.
The
Well,
I'll
we'll have to keep looking through those archives. All right. Well, thank you guys for all coming on this Happy Days of Garry Marshall special episode podcast. It was great bringing some of the Laverne and Shirley Happy Days podcasting community together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And
And if anybody else there wants to start a Mork and Mindy podcast,
Yeah.
we're here for you.
Yes.
how fun did Mork and Mindy look in those clips, man? Mork and Mindy is like the funnest show. I kept wishing, like, why aren't we reviewing that thing? Like, that show is so much more fun than what we got. What do we got? The Fonz? They got Mork. He's a freaking alien. Why do we get
Dauber.
and Pam Dauber? Every week we would get to look at Pam Dauber. Oh, well, we get to look at Anson Williams every week. So,